Hola. I'm going to switch to English. I hope that's okay with all of you. Actually, I'm sure it is. And I wanted to thank all of you for your patience until this time, despite the challenges that today's session saw us witnessing. Today, I'm going to talk to you about a new chapter for low-level light therapy and photobiomodulation technology, which is the tech that Dr. Valdez just mentioned, which has been found to be extremely effective on a number of ocular surface conditions, specifically dry eye, one of the most, let's say, followed conditions in anterior segment care when it comes to science and research. Today, though, I'm going to talk about the latest developments in research that saw scholars focusing on the posterior segment of the eye, and specifically on dry age-related macular degeneration, which, as I'm sure all of you know, it's the leading cause of blindness in the developed world, and is bound to reach 280 million people by 2040. So it's really something that all societies moving forward will need to focus more and more on, not necessarily in order of management, but actually in order of prevention. And we're going to focus on that in a moment. As you know, there's a number of risk factors, like in any other condition, that, let's say, pertain to the field of dry age-related macular degeneration. Some are related to lifestyle, some are related to nutrition, some are related to clearly aging and the state at which biology evolves. And we'll see why this is important in a moment. But what is, let's say, common knowledge by now, thanks to the ARIS studies 2 and 3, is that there are some things that patients, especially the ones that catch it early, can do to slow down the progression and or minimize the pace of progression of the condition. One of which clearly pertains to changing their lifestyle, especially if they're smokers or if they have behaviors that are tied to the risk factors that we saw earlier, some of which are tied to integrators and other things that only lower by a slight amount the percentage of risk of incurring the disease and actually of it pacing fast towards stage 4, whether it's wet AMD or geographic atrophy. Now, the baseline of all the research that there is out there today, while there are some things that shed some light and provide some hope in the long-term future or mid-term future, is that there is no treatment and there is no guideline for the treatment of dry AMD, especially in those cases that get caught early, luckily. Today, there should seem to be some movement, and especially when it comes to light therapy, I'm here to present a few cases that come out of a clinical trial that we started a couple years back now, which are extremely promising and are bound to be needing more research on the one hand, but at least are bound to provide some hope to patients in early stages of the condition. And indeed, out of the 4 main stages of the condition, we are focusing with the Lightwave 1 study on stage 2 and 3 specifically at this moment, but down the line we plan on focusing more and more towards stage 1 and prevention, and we'll see why in a moment. Right now we're focusing on early and intermediate AMD because those are the patients that are most likely to welcome a therapy that is non-invasive, painless, like the one that we offer, and at the same time promises to maximize the chances of slowing down or halting the progression of the disease. This effort comes out of years of research. Low-level light therapy has been invented by NASA in the 70s, and our company has been developing it for human use in the field of ophthalmology for the better part of the last 2 decades. This is the result of our efforts in the anterior segment care, which is where we are most known by now, with a lot of publications already out there, and just as many currently being conducted across all over the world. Clearly, the response that we gained when it comes to retinal corneal conditions has been leading us on having enough credibility to explore the field of retinal research, and this is what led us ultimately to promote this research effort that I'm going to be talking to you about today. First, though, a couple of notes on the mechanism of action and what actually is low-level light therapy. Some of you might think it is a laser, but actually it's very, very different from lasers. On the one hand, in that diagram, which is taken from a paper that studied for the first time LLT in the field of ophthalmology in 2011 by Rojas, there's a clear chart that explains the difference between, from a photonics perspective, from a perspective of physics of light, between low-level light and, or put differently, photobiomodulation and lasers. As you can see, both target the same area, but in very, very much different ways. In one case, it's temporally and spatially synced the type of wave that gets emitted. In the other case, it's aspatial and atemporally synchronized, although it reaches the same target. So it's very, very different way of, let's say, plasma shaping the way that we beam light toward any tissue. And clearly in this case, we're talking about ophthalmology, but it applies to any biological tissue that you might expose to this type of technology. What happens, in short, is that through the absorption of the light by the means of stimulating the photoacceptors within cells, what we do is tap into cells' ability to do their job, whatever that is supposed to be. If in the case of macular degeneration, clearly we're looking at retinal cells. So what we do through this tech is restoring cellular activity and, in a way, to put simply, make cells younger and defy the effects of time. Ultimately, this is not a cure. As you know, age-related macular degeneration has no cure yet. But what it enables us to do is slow down the effects of time as much as possible in order to maximize the chances of our patients having a high quality of life in a totally painless and non-invasive way. This is a deep dive on the mechanism of action, which shows the differences between yellow LLT and red LLT. Both of them share some characteristics. Both of them tap into biochemical reactions in different ways, though. While yellow LLT taps into anti-VEGF pathways and oxidative stress, red LLT has been found to be associated with ATP release, an increase in cellular activity overall. And also, which is something that we might dive deeper later, it's been found to trigger HIF-1 alpha proteins, which is responsible for cells' ability to work under hypoxia, which is one of the main, let's say, leading causes of oxidative stress, which we know is related to dry AMD. So, in short, these are the 5 key benefits that this technology holds. Clearly, the fact that it's rapid in getting a hold of the condition and improving the symptomatology and the pace of progression of the condition. It's totally painless, and it works on all people, regardless of race, gender, skin type, or again, any, let's say, cohort can benefit from it, and it's totally non-invasive. Now, I know that you want to see some cases, so we're going to dive deeper into the actual results from Lightwave 1. Lightwave 1 is a study that involves 80 people in each of the 2 groups. It's a double-masked study, which is bound to be published by the end of the year. And right now, we already submitted the preliminary results at 6 months. This is a 1-year-long follow-up study, and some of which that we're going to be discussing today have been extracted specifically from this first cohort. What we wanted to focus on is not necessarily BCVA, so the quality of vision of these patients, but actually drusen volume. We feel that it's through objective measurements of drusen volume that we can safely predict the pace of evolution of the condition. And we want to focus on this the most because in the mid to long term, our ambition is that of reaching a point where this technology, considering its risk profile, can be employed safely as a preventive measure of AMD even before its onset. Although we are far away from that stage, we are focusing right now on to those patients that have their quality of life impacted by the stage that they're at. These are inclusion and exclusion criteria in case you want to dive deeper. The only thing that I want to mention is that we didn't do any dilation of the pupil, nor we picked anybody with dense cataracts in order to maximize our chances of having a clean, let's say, sample. And these are the follow-ups that we did at every step of the way, some of which still need to finish when it comes to 1-year follow-up for some of the centers. It's 9 centers involved across Europe currently doing the study. Clearly, we have baseline. We have 1 month after the first cycle, which we're going to describe in a moment, and 4 months after the end of cycle 1. And then there's cycle 2, which is a maintenance cycle of therapy after the loading dose at the beginning. So how does it actually work in practice? It's through this mask terminal that administers and delivers light to the surface of the eye, both with eyes closed and with eyes open. Part of the protocol sees eyes being closed to maximize comfort for patients who clearly have no pain in either way, but do not enjoy looking into a very bright light, even if it's just for a few seconds. So to maximize it, we envision 300 seconds of light being exposed through the eyelids, and we found that it reaches the cells within the macular level very effectively anyways. And we have a section with pulsed light with eyes open of 60 seconds. This gets repeated for both yellow and red light. And as you can see, applying the mask, which you can find, by the way, at the booth down there, if you want to see the one for advanced anterior segment care, is extremely easy and it's extremely comfortable for the patient. This is very relevant because if we're dealing with elderly patients, like in the case of dry AMD, you want to maximize their comfort. And getting something that they can benefit from, even laying down on a chair, on a sofa, or on a bed, is something that really maximizes patient compliance. This is the cycle of therapy that we're currently testing, and it probably has room to be optimized even further, but has already shown very significant results. So the first loading dose is between 7 and 8 sessions, twice a week for 3 to 4 weeks, all the way to the second maintenance cycle, which is a lesser intense set of sittings, each of which are 6 plus 6 minutes, so a total of 12. And now we're going to dive deeper into the cases. This has been published relatively recently. We presented them at ARVO in Seattle 3 weeks ago, and they will be published into YOVS alongside retinal cases and brief reports journal very soon. The first one is a very typical case of the type of patient that we were looking to get when it comes to this type of clinical trial. And it's a classic AREDS 3 case that we're going to be commenting now. This is, remember, after only cycle 1 of therapy, so 8 total sittings within the first month of therapy. And as you can see, we found a reduction in both drusen number and drusen volume. You can see it highlighted there. On a number of levels, and especially with no atrophy involved. This patient is now 6 months after these shots that I'm showing you here, and we can confirm that these didn't absorb, let's say, spontaneously, but rather it was the benefit of the therapy that saw this type of improvement. You can see another scan here, and finally a third one over here. Clearly, this came also with an improvement in BCVA, which rose from 55 to 60 letters, and has led to clearly an appreciation of the improvement in quality of life. This is a second case, always a case of dry AMD in AREDS 3. Even in this instance, we had a reduction in the amount of drusen that were present at the beginning of the scan at baseline, 1 month before the therapy. And even in this case, the improvement in BCVA came right after moving from 52 to 56 letters. Now, these two are interesting cases, and the good news is that in the broader sample with the double mask, these results have been confirmed on the entirety of the sample. Unfortunately, I cannot share with you the actual data today because they haven't been peer-reviewed yet, but you need to trust me on that, and they're going to come soon enough. But what I wanted to share with you before wrapping up is the fact that one of the investigators had the intuition, considering that the technology works at biochemical level, to apply it to other retinal conditions, and specifically to a very particular case of chronic central serous chorioretinopathy, which also showed massive giant pigment epithelium detachment with subretinal fluid. And this was a patient that really had already tried everything in their power, moved from doctor to doctor at least 3 to 4 times, and came to the clinic, to the University Hospital of Naples in particular, with a very, very low visual acuity and a really unfortunate situation. This is the result after just a few weeks of therapy. Again, the protocol is similar to the one we saw. So twice a week sessions for 6 weeks in this case instead of 4. So a stronger loading phase. But as you can see, we ended up gaining over 35 letters for these patients. And all of it was achieved with 0 pain and 0 discomfort for the whole duration of the trial. In this instance, you can see that both the PED and the subretinal fluid completely reabsorbed. And for this patient, actually, we went further and did both FAF and microperimetry studies, who ended up confirming the same type of dynamic and the same type of pattern. This led to the opening of a new clinical trial, which we're now running specifically on CCSC, which hopefully will open up to new possibilities in retinal care in that sense. And anecdotally, I can tell you that conversations that we had at ARVO and the recent other congresses where we partook speculated that this could be applied in other fields such as diabetic macular edema, retinitis pigmentosa, and possibly some others that we still don't know about. And that's really the beauty that we saw in this technology years ago when we started developing it, which led us to, let's say, get to this point and explore all of it. So in short, there are positive outcomes when it comes to this type of therapy, especially considering its risk profile. It's something that we really welcome into the future as more and more people will get access to it. It's just been approved for commercial applications in Europe and all the 27 European countries last week as we speak. And it's soon going to come also here to Mexico and other regions in Southeast Asia and Latin America. So thank you for your time, and I will welcome any question if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Matteo, for your presentation and the wonderful clinical cases that you presented to us. ¿Hay alguna pregunta para el doctor Matteo? There is one question. Yes.
Thank you, Doctor, for your speech. I would like to know your opinion and the opinion of your coworkers about the other etiology, vascular etiology of age, macular degeneration, about the reduced internal diameter of the artery, ophthalmic artery, occasionally the etiology of the macular atrophy. This approach you present to us, it's like a boundary, an external boundary within the etiology. I would like to know your opinion about this etiology, vascular etiology, occlusive one with macular atrophy.
So if I understood correctly, the question revolves around applying it to later stages of the condition. So there is let's say, positioning answer and the scientific answer. The scientific answer is we don't know yet because we haven't run studies on either wet AMD nor on geographic atrophy. So we don't know really if we can, let's say, find any benefit and find any profit into applying it in that endeavor. What we know for a fact is that some people will start testing it out, especially maybe in conjunction to intraocular injections in the wet type of AMD, which some people speculate might help and boost, let's say, the effect. It's not something that we want to promote, though, because on the one hand, there's already some solutions in that type of endeavor. Clearly, I'm referring to wet AMD and not to GA. And on the other hand, because our focus in the future lies on prevention. So we want to catch this thing as soon as it comes, and or if possibly before it's in any way onset onto the retina, in order to minimize the chances of it developing at all.
There is an Argentinian group who's putting a stent and a balloon in the ophthalmic artery, and it improves the perfusion of the macular area.
Yeah.
So this is one approach, external approach, and an internal approach that can help the patients. But it's a interesting topic that I would like to know if you recommend it. Your team is on it.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend
speaking about it, or it's just this external approach.
I mean, I'm not in the position of recommending it because we don't have data yet. But I encourage you to try, considering the completely harmless risk profile that the technology holds. Really, there's no point not to try it out. And considering that we have enough evidence when it comes to scientific literature of its efficacy in triggering a whole bunch of different pathways within cells, there is a chance that you might see some changes in other fields and in other types of applications. Although we don't have a, let's say, developed protocol for it yet. But I hope that we will.
I hope it do. Thank you.
Thank you.
You showed us some images where the volume of the drusen were smaller. Do you have, or that paper have some correlation with visual acuity?
That is a very good question, and I wouldn't want to share the answer yet because the thing is not published. But what we found is that not necessarily is the answer. There are some instances where you have an improvement in BCVA and not an improvement in drusen and vice versa. But those are the instances where usually BCVA is non-relevant. So what we're trying to achieve is a therapy that has a positive impact no matter what on drusen volume. And if that comes to also impacting BCVA, as long as it has been impacted in the first place, then so be it. But most of these patients do not have any visual acuity impact, despite having drusen volume increase and drusen volume and drusen amount increase. So they show on OCT scans and OCTA scans as drusenoid patients, but they do not have any impact when it comes to visual acuity. That is why we need to focus super hard in the future to raise awareness around the need for frequent scans and frequent visits, because a lot of people wait until they get symptoms out to go to the eye doctor, and we need to catch it as early as possible. So that's ultimately why we focused on drusen volume first. Thank you.
Thank you. ¿Alguna pregunta más? Muy bien. Facundo, ¿gustas decir algo? ¿O ya damos por terminado esta sesión? Pues en nombre de Facundo Bajamonde y de todo su staff y su equipo, les damos las gracias por acompañarnos a esta comida de la industria. Esperamos que sigan disfrutando y aprendiendo mucho durante este congreso. Muchísimas gracias por su asistencia.